This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
You're now in the Essential Zone, where we seek to be informative, inspirational, enlightening, and dynamic. But more importantly, we seek to be fair and balanced. There comes a time when the game tolerates no spectators, only players. There comes a time when we must recognize that our individual aspirations shape our collective destiny. There comes a time when getting in the game, despite the risks, despite the challenges, regardless of the cost, is simply the right thing to do. There comes a time when we must find our hearts, find our soul, and pursue our purpose for the greater good of all, for country, for humanity. There comes a time when we must manifest our true greatness. Yes, there comes a time, and that time is now. So let's get down to the essentials. The essentials. Serious radio for serious people committed to advancing the national conversation. And good evening and welcome to Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Welcome to the Essentials, The Reset. I am your host, Hubert Edwards, and this evening we are going to have ourselves a wonderful conversation, a sobering conversation. There comes a time when we must all get in the game. There comes a time when the game tolerates no spectators, only players. Today is the day on which the royal couple visits the Bahamas, and we want to pause here to say welcome to them. We trust that you will enjoy every single aspect that has been afforded you. You will see the island in all its glory. You will see and appreciate the humanity of the people in all their glory. You will see the youth, the younger one, the teenagers, the elder ones, all those who represent the melting pot which represents the Bahamas. And we look forward to hearing from you. And we are hoping, at least I'm sure some other persons are joining me in this hope, that on this leg of the trip, there may be the possibility that some things will be slightly different. So we're going to have ourselves a conversation this evening, a very respectful conversation. We are not here to be disrespectful, to bash anyone. But we're going to have some reasoning with a couple of brothers. And before that, we have one of our elder states lady from the Caribbean region to kind of give us a sort of an update, if you will, of how the trip went as the couple passed through Jamaica. As we know, they went to Belize and Jamaica, and now they left the Bahamas. The Bahamas is last, and we understand that they're in country. So different persons, I am aware, have different views on what the monarchy and the royal couple and the queen and the offsprings represent. And so we always are going to be respectful of that. We know the persons are going to differ in their views. But we would love to hear them. We would love to have a conversation around that. And in all things we do, certainly in all things that I do, I have disciplined myself, I have trained myself to always look for the humanity within. And so despite my views of you, despite potential disagreement, despite whatsoever it is, I look for the humanity. And what that does is it informs my expectation. And my expectation is that you as an individual, a fellow being, a fellow human being who should be a reflection of my own humanity. And I expect for you to look and see in me my own humanity, so that we together can see the humanity within us and make ourselves that much better. The human race. And so I have this afternoon, this evening, it's certainly a pleasure to welcome back to Guardian Radio, to welcome back to the Essentials, a colleague who, well, I take liberty in saying colleague because, this is a lady that operates in the stratosphere. I hope to be there one day. But certainly I have had the privilege of interacting and sharing and learning from her. So I want to welcome back to Guardian Radio, Professor Hamilton. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's certainly a pleasure for you to be here. We want to talk just a little bit about the royal couple, the trip through the Caribbean and what this represents for us as Caribbean people. I know that you're a part and parcel of certain advocacy group. But before we get into the views espoused by your groupings, just to give us a flavor of how the Jamaican trip went from an internal perspective. We've been following the news, but you are there on the ground.
Well, I think she got a good feel for the Jamaican society. There are a few Jamaicans. There's some Jamaicans who want to get beyond the history and just quickly move along. There are Jamaicans who accept the royal family as just another set of individuals, and but there are also others who see the royal family as a representation of the past, a past that is still with us, embedded in our legal arrangement with the Queen of Head of State, and other legacies that resonate throughout our system, our education system, the levels of violence we have in Jamaica, the psychological remnants of that experience. Bob Marley has sung about it, mental slavery, and so on. So we remember that, and so there's not a fond experience of the royal family, and therefore it was an opportunity for members of our advocates network to remind these young royals of what they represent to our society. We gave them, in fact, 60 reasons why they ought to apologize. And in your opening remarks, you talked about humanity and how we need to treat each other. So if your ancestors had been inhumanely cruel to another set of people and they say, apologize for it, just a respectful apology. If that cannot be done, there's a problem. And what we saw at the end of the visit is a perpetuation of the images of the colonial era, where the sovereign comes to inspect their servants. That was the image that was left. They left with a car and an open thing, and they had on military
regala,
the uniform. Yes, I'm not sure what they landed there with, but it's that kind of imperial look. And that didn't sit well. It was just a relic of the colonial past. And to leave on that note was just adding insult to injury.
This perspective, and I just want to inform my listeners that I have also on the line Ian Mara, and another brother, Marlon Miller, who we will be talking to shortly, right from here from the Bahamas. We'll be talking about reparation, and of course we'll get some of these views, but just wanted to get Professor Hamilton quickly because she has other commitments. But in coming back to you, Professor Hamilton, the perspective you just espoused, and very clearly, and I think popularly, is not universal, is it?
Well, the truth is that this relationship we've had with our past have always been controversial. In fact, on the slave plantation, we had, members of the enslaved group who were prepared and comfortable in the home, the house slaves, who, fostered a good relationship. Some of them were spared some of the harsh beating. Some of the women were well raped and so on, but you accepted that as a price of living a little differently than the masses.
Mm-hmm.
So the divisions have always been there. They run deep. And so for people who have benefited from the colonial process, and their ancestors have benefited, they don't have a fundamental problem with the monarchy because they are also beneficiaries. But if you think about those of us, many of them who are voiceless, who do not have the opportunity to speak, so it's hard to assess whether their own views, but they are landless today.
Mm-hmm.
In Jamaica, 20% of our population is landless. And we had laws prohibiting the ancestors of enslaved Africans from owning land. So those are the actual legacies that we have today.
Mm. And as we saw in Belize, there was a uprising which kind of rallied around this idea of land and land ownership and who own it. We would have seen in Jamaica, spaces where which are traditionally viewed as being reserved and revered were kind of open up to the royal, coupled with some level of controversy, especially that meeting with the Nyabingi group, which has been forcefully revoked or forcefully rebuked, I should say, by the Rastafari, or at least one Rastafari priest here in the Bahamas. It is this type of some do and some don't, which makes the conversation around these personalities that much difficult, isn't it?
It absolutely is, because it fosters even more divisions among us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are Rastafarians in Jamaica who are quite upset at those scenes. In fact, a few of them well-known Rastafarians, Mutabaruka, Queen Ifrika, were with us when we made the stand in front of the British High Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And that stand was an opportunity to voice our views. We used the opportunity to hand that open letter to the representative of the British High Commission. And we used the opportunity to educate Jamaicans about the history, because not only were we not taught our history in a comprehensive manner, but the history that we did get was a colonial version that left us feeling ashamed of being enslaved, rather than being outraged at the wickedness and the cruelty of the enslavers.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of contradictions that persist in our society.
Yes. I often compare and contrast the unequivocal position of the survivors of the Jewish Holocaust with the descendants of the African Holocaust. And the response is always so startling. On one side, there is an unequivocal position that, look, we do not accept that. We're never going back there. There was nothing there for us. On the other side, as it relates to the African Holocaust, there are always pockets. Some persons say, like the former prime minister who went to Jamaica, it's time to move on. Is it time to move on?
Absolutely. We should have moved on from 1962. Now, this is where we are, 2022. It is time. And some of us are of the view that it's not simply moving the Queen of head of state, but more importantly, rooting out the colonial legacy,
mm-hmm.
and reshaping an economy and a society in our image that we can feel proud of, that we don't have to be ashamed of because we proudly speak as Africans, or we dress as Africans, or we wear our hair naturally as Africans. This is a society we have today, where Jamaicans are bleaching their skin. And that's not true for Jamaica alone, across the Caribbean. You see skin bleaching as part of the norm, and the rejection of our African hair as adequate in certain places and in certain spaces. And so those kinds of norms, we have to get rid of them.
Yes. And the fundamental thing which you and your colleagues and many other persons in Jamaica and around the region, and I'm sure some persons here in the Bahamas would ask for, is this concept that having recognized that a wrong was done in another time, in another space, but because there are persons who will contend to you, will look you deep in the eye and say, I am my ancestor. And that is true. It's a position that I do hold. The need for reconciliation, the need for contrition, the need for an expression of humanness and a show of humanity still exists, is ripe, and is necessary. Would that kind of sum up your, you and your colleagues' stance?
Absolutely. It's really coming to grips with the past and severing the exploitation that continues to today. Mm-hmm. And it raises fundamental questions about the kind of society that we want. Do we want a society where we continue to see the inhumanity in the way we treat each other? Look at what is recently happening in Ukraine.
Yeah.
We live in a world in which the color of your skin will prevent you, you would see a different treatment in the face of war.
Yeah.
And so when we did our open letter, we invited the royals to shape a new narrative for their generation and to reflect on the words of the very hero they visited in Trenchtown, Bob Marley, right? Who sang about the philosophy that song War, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned. And we want a society in which there's no first class and second class citizens, and where the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes. And where human rights can be equally guaranteed to all without regard to race. Yeah. That's what we're fighting for.
Yeah. And it's at one level a Jamaican society, a Belizean society, a Bahamian society, but at another more deeper fundamental level, it's the society of the world, isn't it?
Isn't it? Absolutely. We're talking about redefining the world we live.
Yes.
I don't think that Caribbean people should feel that we're incapable of doing that. Mm-hmm. We absolutely can.
Yep.
And so we, more than most across the world, have had a horrific experience that none of us would want to see perpetuated on another race.
Yeah.
And so we should be in the forefront of creating that world. And that's why I'm proud of Bob Marley. He stood up for these rights.
Yes.
And one love meant loving all of us, regardless of color, race, and class.
And I think that is such an important thing. Even as we reflect on that song, we also must reflect on the other one, which says, every little thing is going to be all right. But it will only be all right if we make it so. Because, of course, in a world where there is a contemplation that in a war, crime against humanity is being created. In a world which recognizes that and starts a debate as to the extent to which a Putin or any similar actor should be charged with crimes against humanity, it must be the same world in which atrocities that was wrought up on a group of persons must be seen, has to be seen, needs to be seen and articulated through the exact same lens. And I think, Bob Marley's song is pointed in that regard if we reflect and try to juxtapose, the current discussion versus the long ago occurrence. There seemed to be an imbalance and an inadequacy, inequality in treatment of the seriousness of what was and what is today.
Yes, and I want to say that I think when we think about our future, we ought to reflect on the fact that we are who we are today because of our historical experiences. Mm-hmm. I use the words of our national hero, Marcus Garvey, who said, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." We need to know our past to understand the current and reshape the future.
And I think that's such a powerful, powerful statement. As we wrap up here, Professor Hamilton, your final words, your final position, your final take on the whole of this. At the end of the day, I think you would make the argument, I am highly positive, that there have been two missed opportunities, but there's still a third one. There's still a third chance.
There are many, but there are many opportunities now, and there'll be many in the future. I think for the Bahamian people, like for the Jamaican people, we have to decide who we are and where we're going, how we find ourselves. Do we want to be in a subservient relationship with our former colonial masters? That's an important question to have, because that speaks to your sense of self and the dignity in which you want to carry yourself as a people across the world. So this issue challenges the notion of who we are.
Yes.
And importantly, it challenges the notion of where we want to go in the future.
And so as a Caribbean stateswoman, your final word to those who have this great opportunity to reshape the thinking and obviously the futures, some of them, these people are in many instances younger than many of us. So they have longer eyes, they have farther reach, they have greater influence. So as the Caribbean stateswoman that you are, your final word of encouragement, admonition, advice.
I would say make your voice heard.
Yes.
All views must come, but I would definitely say stand up. I'll end with the words again of Bob Marley. Get up, stand up for your rights.
Stand up for your
rights.
And
make your voice heard.
Definitely make your voice be heard. Thank you so much, Professor Hamilton, for joining us all the way from Jamaica, giving us a Jamaican perspective of the trip of the royal couple, Kate and William. I apologize, I forget their formal title, but certainly as they landed here in the Bahamas, again, we said respectfully, we hope that they enjoy their time here, but we have to have this discussion around the issues that we think from a perspective, from a African perspective, from a diaspora perspective, are important to put on the table. And so we thank you for your continued work, not just in Jamaica, but the work you do. Always look out across the region, and we want to reach out and hold hands right across Jamaica, right across the world, as we say and we shout with a very clear voice. We are seeking to create a circumstance, a future circumstance, where the inequalities have been equalized and the perspectives which shape the fate of a people have been addressed and redressed.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Blessings, Ubuntu. And so, with that, we make a shift, and we have on the line a young man who I love to reason with, and another young man who I believe I'm going to say after today, I love to reason with. Bunga Erman, are you there? Do we have Bunga Erman? No, we don't have Bunga Erman. We have Bunga Ian. Bunga Ian, are you there?
Yes, correct. Right there, who will infirm.
Okay, blessings and love, my brother.
Yes,
Certainly a pleasure for you to join us. Do we have Marlon on the line too? Mr. Miller, welcome to the Essentials.
Yes, you do.
All right, thank you for being here. We want to have a quick talk about some issues as it relates to reparation. There's been this movement, this uprising right across the region. And I think it's an appropriate time, on this particular day when the royal couple is moving through the Caribbean. It's also, I just trying to check my information here to make sure that I get this completely right. I think that today is the 24th and tomorrow is going to be the 25th. And the 25th represents the United Nations International Day of Remembrance for the victims of slavery and the transatlantic trade. And so I think on the eve of that day of remembrance, it's a good place to start having a conversation. Ian, let me start with you. What is your take on this idea of reparation? What is your take on the visit of the royal couple within the Caribbean as they celebrate the 70th year of reign as queen of their grandmother?
Right. Well, first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to share on your platform this evening. As far as the visit is concerned, I think it's no mistake that it coincides with the United Nations commemoration, and it allows us to get greater mileage out of these commemorations that in a lot of ways people wouldn't even know was happening if they weren't here. And so what this represents is an opportunity for us to rekindle that fire that pretty much was starting to go out, that fire of the desire for sovereignty, that fire of our representativity of who we are as a people. Those not so much even nationalistic, but identity goals that we had during the time of in the Bahamas. It would have been majority rule. In the rest of the region, it would have probably been more so during the independence movement. But there was momentum that we have, and we need to, the momentum has been building. And this trip is just one of those things where we see what's happening, and it reminds us of our heritage and how we got here as a people, because it is something that we don't need to forget. And so the red carpet that is laid out for them is really one of the reasons for the need for reparation. There's a thing called Stockholm Syndrome. And I think African people and the royal family and white elites on the whole, I would imagine, there's this kind of Stockholm Syndrome relationship. And so it's almost like you kind of have to wake for their reality. And the thing about it is in the Bahamas, it's because of our historical context, where we didn't necessarily have the strong plantation societies that the rest of the region would have had. We had more of a task system. And so the enslaved Africans had a different economic arrangement, which for some of us means, and in the history books has definitely been repeated over and over, and that slavery in the Bahamas was actually better than in other places, which is totally incorrect because we still suffered from the values. And that's where the royal family still comes into play for so many people that hold on to those those values that were forced and then reinforced, not just in academics, but straight across the board in society. This is why we have people who are still bleaching their skin. Even today, they're not bleaching their skin blue, they're bleaching their skin because the values that society operates on means that there's benefits to them for being able to do that. People do what figure will benefit them.
Right.
It just so happens that our African identity, people don't see where that benefits them, within the values of today's society.
Let me get input from Mr. Miller, looking at the same thing. You're a part of the reparation committee here in the Bahamas. Why would you advocate at this point in time? We have a call. Why would you be advocating for reparation? Why is it important? What is it that needs to be brought to the fore for persons? Before I get your comments, let's take this call quickly. Caller, you're on Guardian Radio, The Essentials.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Hubert, how you doing?
I'm
no pun intended when I say Sir Hubert.
No, sir.
Right.
Take out that, sir.
Our Black history taught us to have manners and respect, and
yeah,
a whole lot of things what we were accustomed to doing for the white man. We really learned that to do that for mommy and daddy, and then they stole us from our homeland and brought us to their place of business, and thus that which we used to do for mommy and daddy, we were now beaten to do for them. But the principle, what they didn't understand, why we did it for mommy and daddy, it was because our blackness recognized the Most High. And so they beat that service out of us for them. But they could not beat the life of Yahweh Elohim out of his nation of people.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I close by saying this as relates to reparation. Great Britain, and I'm only speaking about Great Britain, okay? Because Great Britain, because I'm a Bahamian, full breed, mommy and daddy is from one island, and their parents is from that island. I just happen to born in Nassau.
Caller.
But as relates, sir.
Yeah. Go ahead and feel free to call back. Feel free to call back. Yeah.
What you're saying is so important.
Yes.
As it relates to reparation.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When I analyze Bahamas and you great sovereign citizens of the world, listening. When we analyze what the Creator has given to humanity, it's only natural for those who have benefited from it for 500 years, in fact, 530 years to be exact, for Bahamian, for them to take out of the $270 billion that they're going to spend between 2021 and 2021 and 2031. So that means they already started. That money is already being spent. Please find a way, Great Britain. Queen Elizabeth, while your children here, grandchildren, I need y'all to give us $10 billion so we can pay off our national debt. So I, Amos Jr. Miller, can be the first to not worship, recognize you as sovereign of the Commonwealth. And I want this country to change. But hold on, I want us to stay under the Commonwealth.
All right.
I want us to stay under the Commonwealth. I just don't want them, my leaders swearing to no Queen. We swear to Almighty God.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You can call back if you wish. I want to get to the guests. So, Mr. Miller, as I was asking, why is this important? Why now? On the relevance or the importance of the royal couple visit at this point in time, why it's important to raise the issues around reparation.
Well, like Ian, I would like to thank you for having us on this platform. So we appreciate your accommodation of us. In my opinion, and I think others on the panel and our organization will share the view, is that if now, when the Britain, post-Brexit, Britain is trying to more or less chant a new course, and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson had the term Global Britain. So they're trying to rehash certain old, let's say, relationships, seen as though they're trying to distance themselves from Europe. Now, the Commonwealth is one of those regions of the world where they're trying to establish a new relationship. However, I don't think you can establish a new relationship if you've not mend the problems of the past. And there's a deliberate attempt on the part of Britain to establish a new relationship with the Commonwealth, but they refuse to deal with the vestiges of slavery and colonialism. And we're saying that cannot happen, that should not happen. So it is up on us to make it clear to the visitors, the Duke and Duchess, that we were not open to having a new relationship unless the past has been resolved. And reparations is one of the ways how we can resolve the past. So I think that is what a position I share and other members in the committee share.
Is this, we have been having this conversation about reparation for many, many years. It has risen to the level of the Caribbean. I know that Hilaire Beckles is one of personality there from a regional perspective. We are having conversation here in the Bahamas. We have conversation in different group in the Rastafarian community who were really the original purveyors of this argument long before anyone thought it made sense. The Marcus emanating from Marcus Garvey back to Africa. The Rastaman says, we want repatriation. We also want reparation. The possibility from you and Ian, honestly, the likelihood of us on this side of the world actually receiving compensation for that time pass is what, in your mind?
At this present time,
yes,
it's slim to none. At this present time. But imagine, right, in the 1600s, if our ancestors had asked themselves that question and that stopped them from continuing the fight, what do you think would have happened?
True.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a great
perspective. So, yeah, this is not a movie where you have this great battle and at the end of the battle there's one victor and that's it. This is a journey, and within that journey, we will have some wins, we will have some losses, but in the end, we know that what is right always is what survives. And if we look at it, as we are doing this, we are building ourselves, because in order for us to get the reparations, we have to begin to repair ourselves at the same time. We have to begin to look at those values that we hold on to that are detrimental to our growth and our development. And then we will be able to operate differently. We'll make different decisions. And as we begin to make different decisions, it will impact the world at large. Because it is us who are the oppressed who actually control the majority of the resources. We just don't have control of the machinery and the logistics and what they call it, intellectual property, to be able to truly benefit from it. But slowly but surely, we're waking up. We're realizing that we have to create. And as we begin to create more, years and years ago, the artifacts of Benin, them being returned would be a joke.
Yeah.
But now they're being returned.
Slim to zero, as you said.
Yeah. When the Mau Mau was first battling for reparations, no one even probably heard of it.
Right.
But eventually, as they fought, the tide turned.
Yeah.
And we see that it is working in our favor.
I think you make a powerful point, that this really isn't about scenario. It's not a circumstance where you say, okay, you give me all that you owe me, as Tony McKay would say, pay me what you owe me, because it's not as clear cut as that. Like you say, we are going to win some, we're going to lose some, but at the end of the day, it's about a people get into a place where they become more confident about who they are as individuals, and who they are as a society, and also get into the place where, as a part of, or a portion of the human race, the different segment of the human race, we come together with these peace offering, if you will, with these overtures, with this, connection, and making a signal of reconciliation, that going forward, the world will experience a future which doesn't experience any of those issues as we would have experienced in the past. So as you look at it from that perspective, Mr. Miller, what beyond money is there to be had in this whole process?
Well, that's a really good question, and I was going to make a point to continue what Ian said. There are many things that reparation committees is arguing that has nothing to do with a direct payment. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of ways how people look at it. So if you entertain the scenario that a direct payment will never happen, people have thrown out the idea of debt forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Now you have economists who say that won't work, or it's not what we need, but it is something that in some sense could be beneficial when you consider that governments in the region, some people are operating at 100% in excess of GDP.
All right, stick up in right there. Let's focus on the Bahamas, right? When we talk about reparation, we are actually speaking about those countries which were colonizing. So it's Britain, it's Spain, it's France, it's what other place name? Portugal. It's mainly those countries. But within the grand scheme of lending, many of those countries, the Bahamas don't owe them any money. How would that work? How would a reparation vehicle of debt forgiveness work in that scenario?
Well, I would have to leave that to the minds who are proficient in that area to decide. Mm-hmm. But I was just throwing out a possible example that has been talked about and is being debated. So they have issues of, let's say, healthcare, mm-hmm. and how these nations could help us with our healthcare systems that we see that crumbled and is continuing to face the effects of COVID. Mm-hmm. We have a great educational deficit. So there are a number of things that could help to assist us, and I wouldn't say assist, to repay us. That does not include a direct payment and a check.
Yeah.
And that is the way how we think about reparations outside of a check. Right. It far exceeds a check. Yeah. And those are the things that we need to understand.
Good.
Can I also add?
All right, go ahead.
When we speak about debt, it's the owing, but it's also what caused me to have to owe. And that's where development comes in. And so if I don't owe you directly, that doesn't mean that I'm not affected by a world system that you've created and participated in that leaves me disadvantaged. Yeah. And so this is where, when we're talking about reversal of debts, we have to talk about also access to opportunities, because if it was just about cutting a check and the same systems were in place, mm-hmm. that disadvantages me, then the money would just evaporate and I'd have to pay it back to you, pay it back to you in fuel, pay it back access to intellectual property, yes. to in purchase and in mm-hmm. trade, mm-hmm. and all of these things. I would return it to you. And so the idea of reparations it cannot just be about cutting a check and that is the end of it. That may be a part of it. Mm-hmm. That may be a part of it. And finances is also like a major part of the whole construct. But it is not just a matter of direct finances. It's a matter of access to world markets. If you feed a man, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach a man how to fish, he eats forever. But guess what? If you give a man access to a fish market, he can make his own money too, and he will be able to use that for development. They have access to our markets, but we don't have access to theirs within the whole arrangement. The flow of money has to pass through them to get to a whole other country. For me to send money from here to Jamaica, it has to go through a particular banking route. They control all of these systems. And so when we talk about reparation, we have to factor in all of these things, not just the superficial ideas of, yes, we need money to survive, but how do we break the cycle of dependence on the whole that perpetuates these things that causes it to be hard for me to survive.
Okay.
And this is where access to education, this is where access to resources comes about. And this idea of reparations, it's not, it doesn't have to be contentious, because what it really does is allow the offender the opportunity to participate in the healing of all involved.
Okay, I got you. I want to play a clip for you now. I want you to listen to this carefully, because when we position what is going to be said against the thoughts that you just shared, I'm not disagreeing with you, but let's assume that these thinking are what is representative of the worldview that you're seeking to tap into, and to convince that going down this road of reparation is the way to go. I think you will start to develop an appreciation. Well, at least you will comment when it's finished. But you will start to really develop an appreciation that this may be, a harder climb than most of us would wish to admit. Let's play this first clip from the Duke as he spoke in Jamaica. Play the first clip. Let's play the first clip.
Jamaica has witnessed huge change. But what hasn't changed is the irrefutable Jamaican belief and working together with other nations in support of peace, security, and international law. Prime Minister, your strong statement condemning the invasion of Ukraine is testament to that. Catherine and I were deeply moved by the plight of the Jamaican students who have recently returned safely from Ukraine. Their experiences are a reminder of the terrifying toll and inequality of war and conflicts across the world, which we must never forget. Particularly this week, with the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. I strongly agree with my father, the Prince of Wales, who said in Barbados last year that the appalling atrocity of slavery forever stains our history. I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened. While the pain runs deep, Jamaica continues to forge its future with determination, courage, the strength and shared sense of purpose of the Jamaican people, represented in your flag and motto, celebrate an invincible spirit. It is this same spirit that spurred on the Windrush generation, who came to the United Kingdom to help rebuild after the Second World War. We are forever grateful for the immense contribution that this generation and their descendants have made to British life, which continues to enrich and improve our society. I'm delighted that a national monument acknowledging and celebrating the Windrush generation by Jamaican artist Basil Watson will be unveiled later this year in Waterloo Station in London.
To that, and there are a couple of themes which I pick up. I won't try to lead you in this regard. As you listen to that, just reflect as we take this call. and tell me what is it that you heard, or what is it that you didn't hear, what might have been attempted or a direction may have been moved into, but absolutely didn't happen. Let's take this call quickly, and then we come back to you, our guests, Ian and Marlon. Go ahead, you're on Guardian Radio.
Good evening, Mr. Edwards.
Mr. Sparky, how you doing?
Man, buddy, how you doing?
We're doing well. What you have to tell us?
Let me tell you something, Mr. Edwards. I remember a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, a friend of mine called me and they said, "Would you like to go to Jamaica?" I said, "What?" They said they won 2 tickets for a all-expensive place to go to Ocho Rios, stay up in the Rio, and they wanted.
Sparky, you going to make this relevant to what we're discussing, right?
Hello, Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, you going.
I go on there, and I went to Kingston, went to Montego Bay.
Yeah, but you have to tie this to what we're discussing. This
fun. But all I'm saying is, I don't know how to say this.
Yeah, say it respectfully.
But, Edward, I've talked to you many times, but what I don't understand is how much we love our countries and everything. But I must say this, Edward, I can say that when a man tell me on a talk show that he banned me from life, I can't stand that.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right, have a good day. I think my show is the protest. Who banned Sparky? I think it's Juan McCartney, right? Yes, he's a protest. So let's go back to you, Ian and Marlon. What did you take from that clip with the Duke speaking in Jamaica? Gentlemen?
Well, I think it stopped short of talking about the family's personal involvement in the transatlantic slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a sense of distance from it, like it was bad. These guys have moved on. But there is no acknowledgement there that, yes, as a product of my 4 parents before me, we as the House of Windsor played a role in this, and we want to acknowledge our role in it. It was very abstract, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very abstract. And that's one of the problems we have when this is discussed. Individuals who are discussing it act as if it's an abstract subject that we're only engaged in intellectual discourse, and that we don't know who was involved from who was not involved. And that is forever my contention with these prepared speeches whenever they come up. I think Gordon Brown did the same thing, and others before him.
Yeah. Ian?
Yeah, the words that come to my mind thinking about that is like disingenuous. Going through the motion. You know that there will be these protests, of the actual official. And so you say these words that would seem superficially like some form of acknowledgement. But as Marlon said, you distance your family's collective responsibility and benefit, not just from slavery, but from colonialism also, that impacted the places that they're visiting. And it is almost like an attempt to control the narrative. And it would be one of those things that might leave a division amongst us who are the victims, because then there will be some who would glorify. See, they say they're sorry, and they feel good about that. Those who are into that sort of thing, but we understand that a part of what does that actually, your family directly benefits from. Even today, you're going to come to the Bahamas, or you have come to the Bahamas, and the Bahamas government, the same government that has problems repairing from hurricane after hurricane, hurricanes that have increasing strength because of the industrialization that your country specialized in, the form of industrialization. So how sorry are you Are you sorry in words? Are you sorry in actions? Because definitely, I know had any of us committed an offense, saying sorry would not be sufficient.
Yes.
There would have to be some sort of consequences and reparation that we would have to pay if we make an offense against them. And sorry just wouldn't cut it.
I totally agree.
Thank you for the sorry, but that's one step in this journey that we're trying to go on. You're actually acknowledging it now, but because there's no consequences for you, really, it's easy to ignore it. So now let's talk about how will you repair this relationship. You paid for the slave masters, the plantation owners, to be compensated at the end of slavery. How will you now factor that in? And maybe you don't have the same control over the British government, but guess what? You do have personal finances. How will you do that? You do have personal currency where you can speak to certain issues on international platform, and people will listen to you. If you begin to speak out, this is what you do. So why aren't you speaking out internationally on the consistently on the injustices of racism and how inherent it is and interwoven into all that we do in the world?
Yes.
One of the situations that came out of Ukraine, well, as Ms. Hamilton would have said, is that your blackness still had an impact on you. Yeah. And the impact was not a positive one. It was a negative one.
Yeah, they were pushing people off the train. And that's certainly a great point. I think we need to take a break. We have a couple of texts, and I want to give you my overview because I believe that the person who wrote that speech for the Duke in Jamaica either was very, very callous, not up to speed with what the sentiment was on the ground, or rather insensitive. There were some words that were used. The reference to the Windrush, the Windrush generation, which for Jamaica are the persons who went on the boat to help rebuild UK after the war. The reference of the term continued to benefit to rebuild our society. I think those individuals were not thinking deep enough. And that is the reason, Ian and Marlon, why I believe that there is more than all of the oceans in the world between those who may be calling for a reparation and those on the other side who could potentially pay. There's absolutely no connection. There's absolutely no way, in my mind, that there's a space for those persons together, at least with the current thinking which exists. But as Ian said, if back then persons had given up, then what would we have today? Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into some of the text. We'll have some additional questions for our guests. We'll hear some additional comments. We want to know exactly, is the Bahamas, is the Rastafarian community, are those who are agitating for reparations in the Bahamas asking for something which is different, or is it the exact same thing right across? The Reset. Don't move. Come right back.
Around the world, Cleveland Clinic is recognized as a leader in healthcare. Our team of experts relentlessly pursues the best for our patients. From groundbreaking cancer research to state-of-the-art heart surgery, life-saving innovations happen here every day. When it's time to travel for your health, it's time to travel to Cleveland Clinic. Your destination for care, for every care in the world. To learn more, visit clevelandclinic.org/Caribbean.
Transitioning to a healthy lifestyle can be difficult. At Fresh Market, we're making it easy to choose good-for-you foods with our endless selection of fresh produce and all-natural organic specialty products, moving you closer to your New Year's goals. So, if you're looking to shed a few pounds with a ketogenic or whole food diet, shift things completely with paleo or raw foods, or just simply eat healthier, Fresh Market is inviting you to feed your good. After all, what you eat is what you're made of.
For the best jerk in the Bahamas, you must have Balu's. Pork, fish, and chicken served with our delicious country-style sauce and authentic festivals. Balu's, Nassau East South. Call or WhatsApp 376-8951. Balu's, the jerk with the soul of reggae and the spirit of Junkanoo. Balu's jerk, traditional, slow-cooked to perfection. 376-8951. Get yours today.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
You know it's so essential, so serious. Time for the
Back to the essentials, the reset. We're having a sober conversation, a good conversation, a respect. There are persons out there who may disagree with some of the things which have been said. There are persons who may even disagree with the idea of us having this conversation on this day. Just so happened that, this is the only show I have this week, and it's a really current and important issue to discuss. But I always believe, and I always hold that, regardless of the complexity of the issue, regardless of the sensitivity of the issue, it can be had, and it can be had in such a way where you do not encourage rancor. You do not create a situation where persons feel that there's space for disrespect. You do not create any sort of a situation where persons may feel ashamed of being a part of. And I believe that that's kind of the way we should have and transact and prosecute all our conversations, such that regardless of how uncomfortable they may be, we, one, become willing to have them, and we, two, we have them in a robust, open, and honest way, such that we other side, and hopefully on the other side of those conversations is where we find better solution, better resolution, and we feel better and more confident about ourselves having done it. We have a couple of texts here. This individual says, as we contemplate the feasibility of reparation, let's not forget that reparations for the transatlantic slave trade have already been paid. The enslavers who were compensated for their loss of property. I would propose to you, Texas, that is not correct. That would have been compensation to the enslavers and not reparation. Reparation really would be going to the individuals who were harmed. And in this case, it would have been those who were actually in enslavement and their descendants. This texter says, I say we as a black people should look to the future and move on. We can reflect on the past, but we need to move forward. Now, I believe that we can do both, texter. I believe that in many ways, as a people, we have moved on. We're not sitting back and saying, unless you give us some reparation, we are going to die. We're not doing anything. Our societies are not growing. Well, we're not growing as well as we could because of some of the debilitating effect, the economic effect that arose as a result of the slavery experience and the colonial experience. Those certainly put us behind the eight ball. But to say that we are not moving forward would be incorrect. To say that we should move on unequivocally, I disagree with. I absolutely disagree with. There is a place for us to do this. It's a natural human reaction. That's why when someone walk up to you and slap you, you call the police and say, lock him up. And you say to the judge, charge him and send him to jail. Punishment. and the satisfaction you get, or in an instance where you can sue them in a court of equity, you do so that you can be compensated. It's the exact same thing that's been discussed in a different way. Persons have been harmed, and persons want to. Now, you can make a decision in your own personal space, and you decide, well, let that be. But that's totally up to you. I think this talk of reparation is a form of mental slavery. As a black person, we need to look to the future and prepare ourselves academically and mentally to move forward. History cannot be erased, but improved on and learned from. Let's stop it as a black people, and shall we also require our own? Shall we request reparations from our own as well as those who kill each other? And every day, let's grow up and move on. Same texter. We sold and kill our own people, and we still do this today. We can prepare ourselves as a race. What happened in history was a time of conquest and acquiring territories. We have asked and received our independence and operate as an independent sovereign country. Let's go. I disagree with you, Mr. Edwards. Okay, that's fine. And that is kind of the environment within which we live or ought to live, where you can disagree and I can disagree with you. I do not believe that I could reasonably sit here and say to Ian Mara, you should give up this total idea of discussing about reparation, or the Caribbean community, the Caribbean committee that has been pursuing this for many years, because there are justifiable reasons for doing so. And when you understand fundamentally, as they indicate, that it's really not just about money, there are some really undergirding, principled acts, things that have been is reasonable. And we think that to just say move on, to just say forget, to just say let that go, I don't think that's an adequate approach. I don't think, but then again, that's my personal view. We have a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Edwards.
Good evening, 52.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I kind of disagree with the texter because, I don't know, he might be learning as well as not, but it seems as he's just repeating narratives, right? And so, just to remind everybody, some people still have the colonial stain brain, right? So
no, it's not necessarily about repeating.
I wasn't meaning him in particular because he was in. This is something different now. What I'm saying is, I move on from him. What I'm saying is, as technology has arrived, right, and information is the tip of the fingers, and so information that was suppressed or not widely spread is being so more than ever. So people would be changing their minds now as truths are being revealed. That's just common sense.
Right.
And so when we look at the narratives, we know the history is always written by the winner. But then, Mr. Edwards, even in the book, there's a book named The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, right? Written by Lothrop Studdard. An infamous eugenicist, right? Well, just go and read that book and some of the narratives in it, and you'll see that even post-slavery, whilst they were freeing the slaves, eugenics is why I tell people discuss eugenics. It's multifaceted. Eugenics is multifaceted. So, but I can't explain everything in the radio because I don't have a platform and I don't really want one. I just contribute. So what I'm saying is eugenics teach these ideas. So this is why these things is entrenched. So the song that the lady, so I don't know what was on the sound like a West Indian lady.
Yeah.
Until the
Professor Hamilton.
All right. Yeah, but she was singing the Bob Marley song until the philosophy which was on race superior and another, which is really written by Haile Selassie, and I think was recited at Berkeley in 1969 or whatever when Bob Marley used it in the song. But that song has not been conquered yet because it is so hard to do that because of these same eugenical concepts. But what I'm saying is post-slavery, what most people don't realize is that the eugenicists and the globalists have already put in place Jim Crow measures, bureaucratic measures, the black people insidiously. You see what I'm saying? So there's always hidden racial agendas then. That's a better word. And so we must realize that. And so it's hidden in eugenics.
Okay.
And so because we're not dwelling in it and they have shaped the curriculum for colleges and et cetera, a lot of people, they go to school and they're educated, but they haven't funneled, their minds are being funneled. So when you hear these people disagreeing with what you're saying, that's because they haven't been fed the truth. So I agree with you. I can tell you why. And Dwight said something very important that impressed me this morning when Dwight was saying it doesn't have to be a monetary reparations, which even if it's something is monetary, but what I'm saying is you can still turn around and do other geopolitical or other social aspects of reimbursing or helping the Caribbean people. Dwight said one of the ways was to provide scholarships, exchange, like people that work up there, work there and exchange industrial ideas or just help us in the industrial revolution in some other kind of way, in all kinds of different ways, Mr. Edwards. It doesn't have to be monetary, but you get the picture. So you said the same thing.
Thank you.
So that's why I'm saying I agree. But they want us to make it look as if we get the reparations and we'll be happy. But the thing is, the history of Africa is wide, and then now we see why Africa was suppressed and compartmentalized post-World War II, what they call the New World Moral Order, in which they segmented it into 42 pieces.
Thank you so much for your contribution. I want to go straight to you, Marlon. You heard the texter, the sentiments of the texter. What would be your take? You're a more learned individual than I am. You're steep in this type of a thinking. What would you say to the individual who say, no sense talking about this. It's time to move on our contemplation of our history 500 years before now. Are we going to be shackled with that 500 years to come? Marlon?
Let me first disagree in saying I'm not more learned than you, so I would take that back. But it would be, people could walk and chew gum at the same time.
There you go.
And I think that is the mindset that people have. It's like, it's the case where you must do one thing and one thing only. The fact that you are saying, hey, okay, Britain, I think we need some reparations, now mean you cannot develop your own country and move forward as a people and okay, slavery happened, but we're going to do these things better ourselves as a society moving forward. It's not a zero-sum game. And I think that's the part that people are truly missing. Life itself is not a zero-sum game. Because you do X does not mean you cannot do Y. Mm-hmm. And we can advocately and adamantly ask for reparations, but still be fervently interested in nation building and moving forward. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yes, I think that's fundamental. Now, my texter, and I obviously have to shout out to this individual, is engaging us and continues. And I always love an argument. Before I come to you, Ian, I think send something very, 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 very important. Are we going to mull about this atrocity for the next 500 years? I hope not. He's saying, no, it's a hindrance to our race. Of course it is a hindrance. The hindrance is in the mulling, yes, but also the thing which has been mulled for is also a hindrance. Now, you said it's keeping us back as a people. We could discuss that. But here is where our paths divert, and I won't even entertain this discussion because on the facts, you are fundamentally wrong. Take a look at the Holocaust. Are these people mulling around looking for reparations? Come on. History cannot be abused. We have opportunities now to improve through, and we should embrace it. We need to work together and get the mental slavery thinking out of our minds. We can do that. I totally agree with the last part of your text. The part of your text which is misinformed, potentially misinformed, is the idea the victims of the Holocaust, and I think you're referring to the Jewish Holocaust, is not mulling around looking for reparations. Do you know why they are not doing so? Do you understand fundamentally why that is not happening? Because they receive reparations. They may have not gotten it from the persons who endangered them, but they were compensated. Many, many were compensated handsomely in many ways. Moved from one country to the next, given land, given capital, enabled. That did happen. And it made a fundamental difference in their lives and the lives of their ancestors. Ian, you have any take on the text?
Mr. Edwards,
yeah.
To continue that point, the German government paid reparations to the Jewish people.
Okay. Tell you know more than me.
That's one point.
Yeah.
And as a country, Israel is one of the largest beneficiaries of American aid
Yes.
and support.
And support, yeah.
They've gotten reparations.
Exactly.
And they continue to get resources to prop the state up more than probably any country in this world. So people need to understand how the world works and understand what is going on before we jump and chastise us for doing what we're doing.
Exactly. Ian, quickly, we have a caller, but I want to get your views in between. Your take on the Texas input?
I think the text is among those people who see this whole idea as just resting in the past, and they don't realize the impact that it has on us today. Take, for example, within Britain, students from the EU, I think even after Brexit, this continues. Students from the EU get a discounted rate. Meanwhile, students from the Commonwealth pay an international rate. If they had loved us so much, that simple act of providing the same access that other Europeans students would have, it could be afforded to in the very least other Commonwealth countries who paid really for those universities with blood, sweat, and tears to be where they are, And so reparation is not just crying and saying you're giving me some money, but what the text actually shows us is that we have to have a massive education campaign to counter the massive and continuous and consistent propaganda that we are all victims of, that forces us to not realize the state that we're in and who is accountable.
Yeah,
we're quick to blame those. They do play a role, but they're not they're at the end of the string being manipulated. They're not the ones who are controlling the strings.
Yeah, let's take this call. Caller, you're on Guardian Radio, The Essentials. Welcome. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, what I like to say is that it's reparation for me, right? Is about repairing our value, repairing our rights. You see, because we are still in slavery, we are still slaves. The similarities between the poor people today and the slaves is that they cannot afford to live. Just like the slaves. They pay so little that they pay slave wages.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the difference between them and the free man is that, you understand what I'm saying, they could eat more because of the access to food, the access to good housing, and the like. You see, so what we really need is our human rights. That's what we need to repair. We need to be human. You see, when the gentleman talk about eugenics, man, that's to me that's we have to keep it simple. You see, we need livable wage, things like livable wage, access to housing.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? These are the things we need. We need legislation that gives us equality. We need life. You see, so you giving us reparation, you giving us some money and still take away. You could take that money away from us. Just to the rights that we have, just violating our human and civil rights. You see.
Okay.
So, and this visit from this royal family. I mean, I quite shame on the activists in this country that marches every day. They want to march everything political for some political power, but the time to march is now. When you have state visits, that's when it's time to march and to force your government. And you see, and the problem is our reforms. They are the house slaves. And that's what we got to adjust. This panel here needs to adjust. I'd like to know these guys' views on it. We have house slave leaders, you see, that are satisfied with their conditions, and they don't care about the poor slaves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. The texter continues. X and Y has been done. We need to stop reflecting on this way. We need to improve ourselves. I would agree with you that we must improve with ourselves. But texter, I think you need to sit back and reflect and recognize that as a part of our human experience, as a part of the human family, other persons have the right to express themselves the way they want. You take a particular view. You said, I did a thesis comparing Holocaust and slavery. Now, I could be unkind and say to you, maybe your thesis is incomplete, because if you make the argument that if you miss the point that there was, in fact, indirectly reparation to the victims of the Jewish Holocaust, then maybe you need to do a little bit of a deeper analysis. I'm not trying to knock your thesis. All I'm saying is that this is a fact. It exists. And so when you draw the bright line between the two, you have to create the balance. One race improve and one race continue to dwell on and keep themselves oppressed and depressed. I don't agree with the poor me syndrome. We need to look. Okay. Thank you so much for your contribution. Please, that caller that eugenics entails social and racial, biological discrimination, human rights is at the heart of eugenics. You obviously don't know it. So persons are getting very active in terms of the texting. So let's get from you, Ian, and Marlon, as we come to the end of this, because we don't have a lot of time left. But I just want to know, how does this play out going forward? I see that there's going to be a protest from the Rastafari community. I see that there is some support coming from the leader of your committee, the committee that speaks to reparation. You don't have a active protest going, but exactly how do we expect to move from this point where we are, as the texter says, that we keep mulling over this? How do we move this forward? How do we move the needle on this issue of reparation? Marlon?
Well, I think you move the needle by continuous agitation. And agitation could come in many forms. The committee submitted a letter, and the letter has, I wouldn't use the word gone viral, but it has made its rounds. And people who protest is another agitation. People who take up the mantle and say, education will be my form of, let's say, contribution to the struggle. So multiple forms of agitation is how you move the needle forward. And we all, in our respective corners, wherever we sit, can think of individual ways to move the needle forward. So there are many ways how we can do that.
Do you support this idea, Marlon, that in the process of having this conversation, we are actually sitting back, not progressing? Is that a accurate styling of what's happening here?
I totally disagree with that, because intellectual discourse is always good. Because how you know that you're valid is when you put them in the forefront and for it to be critiqued. Mm-hmm. So when we have these type of exercises, we see what is necessary and what we need to do forward. So I am all for intellectual discourse. People would say, shut up and we're wasting our time. That's not the way people move forward and get things done. You always have to engage in intellectual discourse on any issue. So I don't see it as being something that limits us moving forward.
Yeah. In some ways, it actually empowers, because, there is a educational process. There is a process of becoming braver, bolder, and more confident in what is being asked for. Because, to think about this, as Ian said, 100 years ago, an ask like this would have, sent the shivers up the spine of, many individuals. What are you doing? You're trying to kill yourself. You're trying to get in trouble. But here we are today, have the ability to, on radio, on the airwaves, to have an open and honest discussion about what our views are on this. And like I said, I certainly believe that we are very far away from making this happen. I understand and appreciate that there are many ways of making this manifest, but I believe there is such a huge gulf between the two, but wouldn't discourage you trying nonetheless. Ian, as we come to the end of this, get your your final points, and how do you propose that this get transact going forward, given the seemingly uphill battle that you have to face?
Well, one of the things that I would be remiss if I didn't say was that if you're truly interested in how this moves forward, please look up the Bahamas National Reparations Commission on our social media platforms so you could be aware of you and the wider audience that is aware of what are the things that we are actually doing. This has provided a catalyst for us. The letter that was written, as Marlon has said, has gone viral, and we plan to capitalize on that just to keep the discussion alive on various platforms and in various arenas, as we've been doing for such a long time, trying to keep the discussion alive. And so you will see many opportunities moving forward for individuals to participate, those who agree and those who disagree, because we need everyone's participation to really move forward. And so some of the things that you will see us do, in order to find that out, you have to have access to us. Second, participation. We require those who know that we exist, if we're having something, to participate in it, because it will be enriching. And as time goes on, you will see things happen. You never know. We just wanted to write a letter to make a statement of protest and represent the issue of reparation during the time that they were there. We had no idea that it would go as far as it went. And so you don't know will be the thing that you do that will really turn the tables. You just have to keep working. And that's what our ancestors did. That's what we have to do. That's what works.
I certainly believe and support that, the extent to which we have work to do, and we're not doing this with any sort of we're not doing it from a place of vexation. We're just doing it from a place of being comfortable in our views that this is a right thing to do. Our texter says, why do us black people disagree so much and can't see that colonization, that whatever the word is, I can't pronounce it. I'm not going to try.
Miscegenation.
Miscegenation has done a perfect job. Schism. The brother talking human rights when eugenics is the reason for the supremacists to violate us based on pseudoscience or race superiority. So, here you go. Different people have their different views. I really want to thank you, Marlon and Ian, for being here with us this evening to have this conversation. I also want to thank Professor Hamilton for stopping by earlier. I think it was a useful conversation. It's clear that the way forward, the path forward is going to be difficult. It's not an easy one, but I believe that it's one which should be. I believe that it's one which is necessary in this point in time. And I also believe that we have to become comfortable in the moments when it is most likely that we ought to be uncomfortable. We have to be bold, we have to be brave, we have to step forward. And even if, as one show used to say, I think Lester Cox, even if your voice shake, you have to speak up. I want to say to all those under the sound of a voice again, welcome the royal couple. For the persons who are going out to protest, do so peacefully, respectfully. Remember that at the end of the day, you are representing the country, and the country will be unsure wherever these persons go. There will be international people peering in through their televisions, and we, at the end of the day, want to send a message that the Bahamas can dissent, can seek to draw attention, but can do so in such a way where nobody feels uncomfortable. You have been listening to The Essentials. I want to thank you for being a part of that. I want to thank the Texans for being so active, and certainly want to thank you for listening. We always end by saying, do not, never allow your greatness to become a victim of your unwillingness to change. So all that is left to say is, The COVID isn't over. The pandemic isn't over. So be good, do good, stay safe, walk good, one love, and Ubuntu. Good night.